Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Zoe Trohanis. I'm a lead disaster risk management specialist here at GFDRR, and I'm also the focal point for inclusive DRM and gender equality. So today, I'm going to give you a more detailed update based on what Neil's explained about the work program, about how we're doing, how we've been doing last fiscal year, and what we're planning to do next fiscal year on this cross-cutting theme. So we at GFDR are scaling up our efforts to promote a more holistic and strategic approach to mainstreaming inclusive DRM across all of our trust-funded activities, especially with the view of intersectionalities of marginalization that people may face depending on their individual situations and context. So we're also paying special attention to the issues of gender inclusion, persons with disabilities, community resilience, and citizen engagement. And principally, we're doing that by mainstreaming inclusion into DRM operations and analytics through our portfolio. So zooming in on gender, we at GFDR systematically assess all of our grants to determine whether they support the closing of gender gaps in disaster risk reduction, preparedness, and emergency response programs. So we look at, have the teams use gender analysis to inform design? Are they taking actions to close the gaps, and are they monitoring this chain? And so we are also seeing that our gender inclusion efforts, they're paying off. And so it's increasing over time in our portfolio. There's more to be done. But we are seeing, based on our current monitoring, that our grants are increasingly gender informed. So that means either the grants factor into account gender analysis, actions, and/or monitoring. So we hit 90% so far for this fiscal year as of the end of Q2. So we're pleased with that, but of course, more to be done. So following our Inclusive DRM Technical Advisory Group last July, we prepared a work program for this past fiscal year, also based on the stocktake and analysis that we did on inclusive disaster risk management and gender equality to seek entry points in our portfolio. So this year, we've focused on 3 key areas of consolidating and promoting knowledge sharing, capturing lessons learned, and engaging in meaningful dialogues, both across World Bank teams and with our external partners. So there's a detailed review of this in your binder, but I just want to highlight 3 points, the 3 achievements. So one is we've done a comprehensive review of emergency projects to identify different entry points for gender inclusion, of how to close those gaps that I was mentioning before. And we have an event coming up later this fiscal year. We hope you can attend. We've also been working hard to coordinate with our gender colleagues in the gender group and our social specialists here at the bank to provide targeted technical assistance to DRM task teams. Also training on how teams can do this type of gender analysis for grants, because they also self-report that. And we've been working closely with partners, including a recent roundtable event that we just hosted with USAID and UNFPA on gender-based violence and disaster risk management programs. And we're looking to do more of that next fiscal year. So in looking ahead, to FY23, in terms of what we're hearing from teams in the regions, and again, this is where the bulk of our work happens. We're seeing some consistent themes, which I'll get to in a minute. But for example, from Costa Rica, there's interest to develop a community-based early warning system that also focuses on gender, persons with disabilities, and Indigenous people. There's also demand to do more on social inclusion and risk reduction, both in Indonesia and the Pacific Islands, where there are new DRM lending operations being prepared or an early implementation, especially with a focus on gender and disability inclusion. And in Morocco, there's a new program being developed where there's a request to provide technical support to the government to develop an action plan on disaster risk awareness for women. So these are just a few highlights. And looking forward, as I mentioned, globally, we're hearing that teams are interested in developing more skills, more work on adaptive social protection, community-based, nature-based solutions, as well as looking at gender with NBS, and inclusive early warning systems. So we'll be looking across these areas from the operational side, and we will also focus more on results. So strengthening and expanding gender indicators, including disability indicators in the monitoring and evaluation framework, and just overall improving our monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, which Ayaz will speak to. We also look forward to working across these areas with our partners, with all of you, and we're engaging with the University College of London, the Gender and Disasters Network, UN Women, UFPA, among others. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Ayaz Parvez, and I will be presenting today GFDRR's program on the DRM-FCV Nexus with respect to progress, results, and next steps. The objectives of the program are twofold. One is to customize, adopt, and implement DRM interventions to FCV context. And second is to develop, pilot, and scale up integrated DRM-FCV solutions. The key components of the project of the program include global knowledge development and dissemination, and demand-driven technical assistance to FCV countries through bank regional DRM teams. There has been a substantive bank investment in DRM in FCV countries over the last 10 years, which has generated around $2 billion in DRM co-benefits in FCV countries. About 41% of these projects seem to have DRM components. And in terms of classification, these included 31% of emergency recovery, 28% in emergency preparedness, and 23% in resilient infrastructure grants and projects. Looking at the GFDR portfolio over FY 11 to 22, approximately 20% of total GFDR grants, totaling around 139 million, have been in 35 FCV states. And the distribution has been across the various regions. A large part of it is in Africa. And for the recent portfolio, there have been 18 grants that have been activated in FCV countries with a total funding of $18 million. And again, the distribution is leans in favor of Africa a lot, followed by MENA and LAC and ECA. In terms of some of the key challenges that we face in the operationalizing the DRM-FCV Nexus, one is at the country level, there is a lack of a systematic translation of the disaster conflict interplay in DRM policy strategy. Second, the incorporation of fragility and conflict in DRM intervention has been largely opportunistic and person-driven. In some cases, DRM interventions were found to be conflict neutral and blind to FCV issues, which could further exacerbate conflict cleavages. And in some cases, we found that DRM practitioners tend to view disaster and conflict as independent events rather than interactive events. And there's a concern that DRM interventions will slow down if they systematically include conflict issues. But there are also opportunities for operationalizing the Nexus better. This includes, upstream analytical work through GFDRR for mobilizing and informing bank DRM investments in FCV countries. Building country capacities in better understanding and operationalizing the DRM-FCV Nexus through policy development and investment planning, and building greater collaboration and knowledge exchange with partners globally, regionally, and nationally. So we have a key ongoing piece of work I'll not go into the details of it, which is on the development of a conceptual framework for the intersectionality of disaster and conflict risks, which we are undertaking together with the bank's FCV group. Other key program activities primarily include efforts to further attune the 18 newly approved GFDR grants to incorporate systematically FCV-related aspects and components. And at the global level, we are developing a guidance note on urban force displacement that particularly looks at the interplay of conflict and disasters in cities, developing a framework of policy and strategic recommendations for bank and partners on operationalizing the Nexus. And globally, and within the bank, we are promoting the DRM FCV Nexus agenda. A recent development on that was the World Bank Fragility Forum, where we presented the compounded risk assessment. And going forward, in May in Bali, we are organizing the World Ecosystem Conference together with other partners and participating in the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, where we have a heavy focus on FCV DRM dedicated sessions and the issues of recovery, governance, and capacity building for for interconnected disaster and conflict events. In terms of expected results, we have already incorporated the DRM-FCV related outcomes in the GFDR theory of change and results. In terms of intermediate outcomes, a key outcome is the conduct of integrated risk analysis in various FCV environments and development of integrated disaster conflict solutions. And in terms of outcomes, we are looking at enhanced country capacities for generating, maintaining, and using risk information that factors in FCV risks. And finally, we are working on towards the adoption and utilization of FCV disaster inclusion and climate risk informed policies at the country level. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.